Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
and it's number 230 in Sounding the Shadows, which is a very significant number for reasons that I'm not going to divulge because they don't exist. Right!
Well, they might, but we don't know them if they do.
Someone will now write to us and
It's
tell
a
us this.
heck of a significant week, though, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
we were talking a little bit last week about what was happening the other side of the pond, as we say, and now it's happened, and we know that this massive sort of razzmatazz of rallies and chanting and huge crowds has all suddenly become a new president, President Trump. And whatever we feel about that,
Not
it's
till
happened.
January.
No, not till January. But I don't know. I was thinking, and in this country, we have celebrated Guy Fawkes. Well, we have anyway. We celebrated it.
Well, there isn't quite as much of it about, is there? I mean, we used to live in Sussex, and we were fairly near the town of Lewes, which was famous for its Guy Fawkes parades for years. Some of which were really a bit questionable, I think.
Well, and some of them, I mean, they would burn as their guys some quite famous politicians. I have a feeling Margaret Thatcher was one of them one year.
Yes, I believe she did. Turn to
So
dust.
maybe that's our past, and maybe that's why it still feels quite important. Really, not
the
important.
far more important past for me is we loved it, didn't we?
When we had our children.
When we had our children, and we were in the garden, and Kate came, and friends came, and when she was little, and it was great fun, and we had sausages and things. We lit a fire,
and we had toffee apples in which the toffee always slid off the apple and created a pool of hard toffee at the bottom.
Why did you do that? Make it so that
I never learnt how to do them any other way, I don't think. But then we used to put potatoes right into the fire to cook them. I mean, wrapped in foil, but even so, when you got them, they'd often have really black bits around the outside, but their taste was it as good as I remember? I don't know.
I don't think we ever, or very rarely, reflected on the fact that we were sort of burning either in the form of a guy or in some other way some person from the past. Didn't kind of.
I don't think we did, but interestingly enough, this year we were going to have our 3.5-year-old grandson with us, and I didn't want to tell him. We didn't make a guy. Maybe we will when he's older, but I found it very difficult to say, well, darling, what we're doing is we're stuffing some old trousers and with newspaper and maybe putting a balloon for its head.
Burning a replica of a man who tried to destroy his government.
Yes, so we didn't. Yeah. But we thought that this year we would celebrate Guy Fawkes because we don't really do anything at Halloween. We don't really want to, and we love Guy Fawkes. So
we're quite fortunate. We have an expanse of flagstones outside.
Yeah, we do. Outside
so
the back garden.
we lit the fire pit.
We did.
With wood, of course, which was very nice, and we got some food and we put it out.
We did.
And then we also
got ready. Oh, sorry.
We had bought some fireworks.
Some fireworks, some little ones, and a couple of sort of bigger ones,
couple of bigger
and
ones,
some sparklers. But we were ready. We've decided we would build this experience slowly. So yes, forever. But also that was our tradition that we used to have these tiny little fireworks. Mount Vesuvius, I always remember as being one that didn't quite live up to its name.
Very few of them did.
No, but we used to go wow and all the rest of it. Anyway, so this was going to be the experience. And it was set in the middle of the patio.
Our
ready
son
to be
David
lit.
was in charge of
He
it.
He was. And just before...
So we put this, he dug the small one into the ground, didn't
yes.
he? He had the matches ready, long matches.
Yes, he did.
And then...
Well, at that moment, it was the finale of somebody else's firework display, and the most amazing display of all those wonderful sort of flashes and silver spiders running down and chrysanthemums.
I mean, it was magnificent. And you could see Rafa, our 3.5-year-old, thinking, this is phenomenal.
This is pretty amazing.
What's going to happen when we light ours?
So then that one was finished, and we lit our little firework called Silver Rain,
and
it went poof, 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 poof,
and died.
sent up about 5 little shots of something. So then we went on to Golden Rain that did the same, but gold.
Oddly similar.
It was.
But
And
we had the
sparklers.
fireworks, sparklers, which
We
was
did. That's
which was
always
very
lovely.
good.
But I suppose, I don't know, thinking about these rallies, Adrian, thinking about the razzmatazz, the huge, colourful energy going on in this election, the hats, the merchandise, the whole thing, it sort of symbolised to some extent to me the incredible firework display next to our little firework. And I was thinking the phrase damp squib actually came from the time when we would have those little bangers, but if it was at all damp, they wouldn't light, and it was just nothing, and it didn't go. It didn't.
Yeah. Well, I think I really liked the Catherine wheels when we had ours. But we couldn't find a single one of those in the shops.
But also, let's be honest, our memories might be selective because, I remember this wonderful thing spinning and wheezing around and glorious colours. But I have a feeling quite often it got either stuck or it fell off its nail or things didn't always work according to plan. But going back to this idea of the small. And actually, we did love our little fireworks, and we had what we all called our grand finale, which was a slightly more expensive one that did at least send up some very pretty things for a while. And we had some tiny rockets and some sparklers. But this idea of comparing sort of incredible displays of power and then reality, I don't know.
But I think I'm diseased with metaphors, searching for the business of searching for metaphors, and I remembered one or two things connected with the church in the past. One of them was that some people won't have the faintest idea what we're talking about, but back in the 80s...
Why has that ever bothered us?
There was a thing called the Toronto Blessing.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, that was hugely valuable, actually.
It was pretty dramatic, all sorts of amazing things were happening, apparently. If you like, fireworks going off all over the place. And some of the churches near where we lived wanted to send their representatives of their church to Toronto to collect the Toronto Blessing.
To bring it back.
And,
Absolutely.
as you just said, and it's quite true, there were people, but actually, usually because of the way they were made anyway, found something. There are people who find something in anything because they're open to anything.
Yes, and there were, for some people, Adrian, there was, I think, something quite remarkable happened for them. We know one or two people that was so, but it was the sort of toddler screaming of the local church that they should go out and get this great wonderful package of something sparkly and bring it back, and why shouldn't they have it because other people had got it. That was quite ugly and strange.
And this of course was at a time when the evangelical church, of which we are a part, in the strict sense, was wanting to have stuff happening, because I think there was a growing realization that it wasn't quite it when you had the fireworky things happening.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean that the things connected with the Toronto Blessing were things like speaking in tongues, prophecy, the whole list of spiritual gifts in the Bible, which I am not in any sense saying don't exist or are no use, but if your appetite is for that, if things have dulled down and your appetite is to see the fizzers go up,
Yes,
then
feeling you're a little bit of a damp squib. Yes,
long. Yes, that's right.
Yes, I mean, I think the thing that was so odd was that feeling that we all ought to be experiencing something, and that just was never so. That everybody was experiencing triumph and wonders. Even with the miracles, quite often it was an individual or a small group of people. When Jesus was around, it wasn't a continual mass explosion of fireworks, was it? A dazzling display.
Well, not at all. So it was oddly muted in one sense. That, for instance, they said to Jesus and the disciples, "Do your disciples pay tax?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Peter, go catch a fish," and. So Peter goes off to catch a fish, probably very puzzled indeed, and finds in its mouth a coin. But there was no big deal about it. I mean, if you're able to do that, it's great. But the thing that is really important can easily be shelved if you create a culture where, if these strange, different, extravagant things aren't happening, it doesn't mean anything. And also, but there can be a very shallow appetite for stuff that goes whiz bang.
Well, I just think that yes, of course there is a shallow appetite, but also I think it's so easy for us to feel that we are the little damp squib, if you like, that we are not the one who is experiencing the fireworks, the dazzle, I think we've talked about it before, but I mean, it is really an ongoing problem, I think, that feeling of wanting to be caught up in something. I mean, I see the reflection of that every time there's coverage of a football match where you see a huge number of people caught up in something really quite wonderful. And I am not that. I mean, I quite like football actually, but I'm not, I don't understand it all or anything else. But that excitement, that fever, that when a goal is scored and the jubilation. That's like our display that we saw over the hedge, and not like everyday life, which I think is why so many people, it means so much to them, doesn't it? They come home on a Friday night having maybe had, I don't mean everybody, but a lot of people are really quite a boring week. And there's something exciting.
Well, people do need.
So I can't blame people for that.
I don't blame them for anything, but people do need to feel something. And despite what we've just said, when we actually talk to people and they're able to talk truthfully about their lives, those who would call themselves Christian believers, on the whole, the problem is not that. It's about being loved.
Yeah.
And that's a much deeper and more desirable thing for many people. One thing I did also remember talking about this is in the Old Testament, in Leviticus, which all of our listeners will know by heart, more or less. That's supposed to be a joke. There were two young men called, and I know that because I've got them written down here, Nadab and Abihu. And Nadab and Abihu were the sons of Aaron, who was Moses' brother. Yeah. And there was a huge
priests, weren't they?
Well, they were dressing up to become priests.
Oh, yeah.
There was a huge celebration and stuff, and fire came out of the holy, I can't remember what it was, holy tent, cave, I can't remember. And people were amazed and fell flat on the ground and they were astonished. But Nadab and Abihu wanted it again.
That's right.
They didn't want...
Because it had been real.
Yeah, it had been real. Now they wanted it again.
They wanted to feel it again.
So they got some sticks of something or other and they lit them to provide fire, which is to give them that same feeling of extravagant amazement. And I mean, it's a horrible story actually. When they did that, I mean, we're in Old Testament world here. Apparently, God was not pleased by this, and fire came out of the same place and destroyed them. Yeah. And there's a sad little verse which says, I can't remember exactly what it is, but Aaron stood still, very quiet, or something. I can't remember. But there's always been a thing about false fire.
Yes, that something real happens. It is amazing. It is incredible. And then it goes.
And if you
just like the firework display, suddenly it was obviously their finale, their bang, slam, wonderful thing, and then it was over, and the people watching it presumably went home.
Yeah.
And we started our extravaganza, Golden Rain, followed by
more rain.
Roman Candle.
Red Rain.
Red Rain, yeah.
And there's another book, Malachi, where there's a complaint by God that people are putting false fire on the altar.
What did that mean then? False fire on the altar?
I know, putting false fire on the altar. The main complaint was that people were bringing their wretched third-rate animals and birds and stuff.
Yeah.
And presumably the fire was an attempt to produce an appearance of extravagant love and worship to God. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the motivation for it clearly wasn't what it should have been. So.
Oh dear. I mean, it happens again and again and again and again of apparent glamour, apparent power, apparent massive display of glory can so often not be based on reality. And I'm sure that's why Jesus wanted us to have in our memories, in our Bible, the story. Well, I mean, so many of the stories, how were they written down? Who knows? But of him sitting on a hill somewhere, and we've been to those hills, those mountains. They're very rough and uncomfortable, aren't they? They're not a little grassy hillock. They're quite tough. And talking to people sitting there, blessed are the poor in spirit.
Yeah.
Blessed are those who mourn.
Yeah.
Blessed. And I would love, I'd love to have heard his voice. Simply because it must have been listenable to, or they wouldn't have listened, really. And to think, that, yes, I am only a small silver rain, a little tiny firework. And, as children we sang that song, This Little Light of Mine. But I think now, in my late 70s, I'm beginning to think, well, that's what I've got, a little light.
Well, but it's also about the fact that it's worth more than you think.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, because I was talking to someone just this week about love, and it was someone who had to do a talk, and he's talking about what do you say to people about God loving you, and I know the problem that he was trying to express was that if you say that you think you have experienced love from God, then you sound as though you are raising yourself above those who have not. But the problem with that is... So back to
the Toronto blessing, really, that you have experienced something quite genuinely, and many people did. Yeah. But as soon as you say it, it sounds as though you're setting yourself up as being somebody that the Holy Spirit blesses you.
But in fact, the difference is phenomenal, because what he is talking about and what is experienced is not that sort of fireworky stuff.
Well,
one of the things he said to me once, as I walked up the stairs one day, I felt overwhelmed by the love of God.
Yeah.
There was nothing spectacular to see, but I think whether it's a fear in people of facing up to the fact that the things that have been sung about and talked about don't happen as perhaps people think they should. I don't know. I just don't know. But I do know, I mean, I only mentioned it briefly, I promise. I know I was always on about the road to Emmaus, but the fact that there was a burning that these people recognised, they didn't want to go back to the fireworky stuff. What they said was,
no.
Do you remember how we felt when he spoke to us? The burning inside us.
So they wanted to go back to the reality of it, didn't they?
That's right.
And getting on with the job.
Yeah.
And that obviously was always why, quite often there would be something happen that just helped people to get on with the job, to get on with the next thing. And so there were little sparky bits always, and there always will be in the story of faith, I think. There will be moments, and we read about them in other people's lives, but in our own as well, moments when, as you've often talked about Elijah and giving giving some comfort to him just so he could get on with the job. Yeah. I mean, that has always been the case, I think. That extravagance of love, so that you remember you're loved and you can get on and be part of the solution.
Yeah, I must say, looking back over the last, whatever it is, 25 years or something, the things I remember that really support me are moments of strange intimacy. And I don't even want to say with God. I putting labels on things really ruins them. But moments of feeling something very special about not just being loved, because being loved without being liked is a bit of a pain, isn't it? But being liked, like with our grandson, we tell him we love him, and I sometimes say to him, and I really like you.
And I do feel sad for all the bonfires that don't happen anymore in people's gardens, where there was something so unique about that one night of the year, where as a child you stayed up late, as a child you put on your woolly hat and you had to have your gloves so you could hold your sparkler or whatever it was, and that coziness round a live fire, which most of us can't actually have in our gardens anymore, but that sense of togetherness.
Our
really
fire pit worked well there, didn't it?
Yeah, and that was like a mini fire, and that was lovely. Yeah. Now, so we don't know what's going to happen in our world, but we do know that we have to hang on to that idea that small can be beautiful, I think, and that maybe we do have a job to do, whatever is going on, really.
Yeah,
it's a bit difficult to quite see what it is.
People will experience love, I think, in whatever way, from whatever direction. Yeah. It's the thing that changes life, changes people.
And we need to pray for our world. Yep. Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear your experiences of special times, actually, whether it was Guy Fawkes or whatever it was, times when something different happened.
Yeah.
And
perhaps you were hit by a rocket.
I was just going to say, I had a feeling you might say something like that. Anyway, the grand finale being hit by a rocket.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Speak to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.